Hello ELP teachers. This is going to be a very condensed version of our presentation that we were supposed to give at the teacher retreat. And we wanted to tell you about all the exciting things that we learned at TESOL. And I'm sure you know us all, but I'm Ashley Green.
Sophia. Katie.
Anne.
Okay.
And Janelle.
Yes, and Janelle, who's doing the lovely camera work, and she's got 3 cameras going. It's exciting. Okay, I will get started. I went to a lot of sessions. Victoria and I went to sessions together on games, and it was very interesting to go to these sessions on games. And one of the things that Victoria and I talked about after the sessions that we went to was that we really feel like we don't have time for games in the classroom because we have so much that we have to cover, so many tests, so many different homework assignments that we have to give, quizzes, that there's no time to stop and have fun because we're constantly grading. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, we're required to use so much of the textbook, and I feel that sometimes we get a little limited by the textbook, and we get trapped in this kind of boring mold of just doing the same things over and over again. So the games presentations for me were really encouraging because I think that no matter how much assessment we have to do, there has to be time always for having fun. And if we're not in the classroom trying to engage our students, then there doesn't seem to be much point in what we're doing. So some of the presentations that I went to a really good one on pronunciation games, which was really fun. And I would love to show you. And if we were doing our teacher's retreat, I would. There was a really fun game with Play-Doh. That has been talked about a lot in our group and has become quite famous. And the game with Play-Doh is really fun. It's practicing word stress. So you have the students come up with words that have more than 1 syllable, and have them think of words that have 3 or 4 syllables. And then have them, with Play-Doh, somehow visually illustrate how the stress is divided up in that word. So if the word was, I don't know, Massachusetts, then where is the stress in Massachusetts? And they would have to show with Play-Doh where the stress is in Massachusetts. So the stress is on the 3rd syllable, and there's a little bit of stress on the 1st syllable. So they might do something like roll all their Play-Doh together in 4 little balls, and then the 3rd ball would be really, really big. Or you can do anything, play with the Play-Doh. And so it's a fun way to not just hear the stress, but also see the stress, which I think is good to do activities that really bring in all of the senses.
You could stretch it out for the lengthening.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One person made like a little worm, and they put little eyes on it in the group, and then there was like a hump in the worm's back, and that was the stress. So everyone, when we did it in the room, it was really fun because all of the groups came up with different ways to represent the stress, and it was really, really cool. And then we did another thing in there that was really fun with thought groups, which was such an easy activity. I couldn't believe I'd never thought of it. The guy who led the session apparently is also an ordained minister. Oh. And so he showed us wedding vows that he reads. And so it was really cute. It was, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." And so he wrote it in a paragraph form. And he has his students figure out where the thought groups go. If they were having to perform a wedding ceremony, how would they divide up? When would they take breaths, basically? And so then what he does is he gives the students strips of paper, and they write each thought group on a strip of paper. And then they stand up in front of the class, and they read 1 strip of paper at a time, and then they take a breath, and then they read another one. And he said it's funny because sometimes they put too much on a strip of paper, and then they're running out of breath. And they realize, okay, you need to stop and pause. And so it was really fun. He had some great activities, and we all had a good time in there. And I thought, this is great. I mean, it really does teach the students something, and it's also really fun to do. So.
And it uses all the senses, which is what they talk about. You know, the Play-Doh uses the
exactly
the senses.
Yes, which I think is good because I think pronunciation sometimes is really hard to teach. But I think if they can connect it to something that's tangible, then it makes it a lot easier to understand what it is that they're doing. Yeah. So I really liked I liked his ideas for the games, and then I have a ton of grammar games, which I would spend time explaining. Here they are. Lively grammar games. So exciting. But rather than explain, these are actually really good, and these women have, it's a whole packet full of games. God, it's 10 games, well, 10 ED, I don't know. Anyway, I thought it would be fun to make copies of this for everyone, and maybe we can scan it and put it on ELP 101 or something, because these games are quite complex. They made game boards, and they have all kinds of stuff, and they have really detailed instructions, and Christine would love this, too bad she's leaving, because it involves all kinds of props, and you have to bring dice in, or little hand clappers, and there's all kinds of fun stuff. But there's tons of good grammar games in here, and I think this would be a really fun way to practice grammar, and not just constellation questions, quizzes, or things that they find really boring.
Would you use these games with your advanced classes? Like
Yeah, they
Play-Doh?
have a lot of...
Not just the grammar games, but the...
Yeah, well, actually the guy who did the pronunciation presentation, he uses these with his advanced speaking class. That's the class that he uses them with. And he said it was good because at that point their language is at a level where they're able to understand these concepts. Whereas at a low level it might be a little hard to explain, like block groups and that sort of thing, it might be hard. So he actually uses it at more advanced levels. I'm sure you could use Play-Doh, would be fun, I'm sure at any level.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could do that in a reading class too, because you do vocabulary. So you could incorporate that in, even though you don't necessarily do pronunciation in a reading class, you're doing new vocabulary, so you could bring it in anyway for fun.
And the students are okay with it because you had that really good activity with your speaking class, do you remember? With
Are you
Dr.
talking
Seuss
about-
And then one of the students said, you know, we're in 150. why
The
was
one fish, two fish.
That was
Yeah.
really good, you know?
Yeah, it was. I used Dr. Seuss. I have used, and I still use sometimes Dr. Seuss with my students for pronunciation, and I have the book One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish. And it's really good because each page, it's like Dr. Seuss focuses on a different vowel sound, and then there's good stress patterns there, and intonation and rhythm, which I really like. And I had a student who got really mad and said he couldn't believe he was paying all this money to read a book about fish. And he stormed out of the classroom. Even though I had explained beforehand, look, I know it's a children's book, but we're not doing this for reading practice. And I do try to explain that when I use stuff like this. It's like, look, I know you're more intelligent than this. This is not an insult to your intelligence that we're playing with Play-Doh or we're using Dr. Seuss. It's just that I think that this is a really fun, interesting way to teach you something that you do need to know that is more challenging than just reading Dr. Seuss.
And I
that
think if you
usually
present
works.
it that way, that reaction was unusual.
Yeah, it was. And the other students told me, I mean, they apologized for him, and they didn't have any problems with it. So, and he actually wound up being a really good student. So it was just, obviously he was having a bad day, and the fish was not,
Set him
didn't
off.
like that. Yeah, exactly. He didn't like that so much.
The last straw.
Yeah, but I think the Play-Doh, I feel like our students are kind of like kids in some way. You know, they still they still want to play with toys. I mean, we took them out and flew a kite with them.
They
so,
know how to play.
Exactly,
Yeah.
they do. So I feel like they would get really excited about Play-Doh, and the hard thing would be like, okay, stop making little shapes and stuff. We need to get back on task.
And a lot of the research now on animal baby learning and human baby learning is the learning from play. That's basically whether you have all the fancy gadgets or whatever, the young child develops as long as they can play.
Well, and if you're enjoying something, it lowers the affective filter, and so you're...
Yeah, and that's a big part of it too. I mean, that's another reason I like games, because it makes the students more comfortable coming into the classroom and learning. And,
Are the grammar games, are they for all levels? I mean,
they have a wide variety. I can go through and maybe read some of the titles of them. Let's see, this is Come On 1 or 6, which I'm trying to remember what this practice. Oh, this was reviewing verb forms. This is really cool. You give students a list of verbs, and then you tell them, they roll the dice, and each number represents like a different tense. And then you say the verb is here, and you have to use it in the simple past tense. And then they have to create a sentence in the simple past tense if they rolled 2 on the dice or something. And so it's really fun, and then they get a point if they do it correctly, and you know, they lose the points or whatever if they don't do it correctly. It's really fun.
So it's all...
Yeah, so there's all kinds of different levels, and a lot of these you can really adjust the difficulty levels. So you could, if you were doing an upper level class, you could skip simple tenses for this, and you could only do.
You could also use the blackboard for that.
Yeah, oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, you could do. So there's lots, I mean, I think there's a lot of flexibility in these games, which is why I think they're really cool. So I'm definitely going to post them for
And that was a handout.
This was a handout. I had to fight really hard to get this handout. They made like 200 copies, but then the room was crowded, and so not everybody got a copy. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I know. I had to like crawl over some people. It was not pretty. It was not a pretty sight actually. And I'm glad that no one I knew was in the room. Because I just ignored people who were like, hey, can you grab me a copy? And I just pushed past them all and kept going. So, but I got my copy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. So those are the kinds of things that I really got out of TESOL, and it was really enjoyable. So what about the rest of you?